Chapter 1. The Invitation to St. Aldhelm. The autumn rain tapped insistently against the tall windows of Hercule Poirot's London flat, as though the weather itself were impatient for an answer. Poirot sat in his favourite green velvet armchair, legs crossed with precision, a small cup of thick chocolate balanced on one knee. On the table before him lay a single envelope, thick cream-coloured paper, sealed with crimson wax bearing the impression of a Gothic arch. The handwriting on the front was hurried yet elegant, the ink still faintly fragrant with ecclesiastical incense. Poirot turned the envelope over once, twice, his moustaches twitching with curiosity. He disliked surprises, yet he adored enigmas. With a silver letter opener shaped like a miniature sword, he slit the seal. "My dear Monsieur Poirot, forgive the intrusion upon your retirement, though I am told you never truly retire from the little grey cells. I write in utmost urgency from the village of St. Aldhelm, in the county of Wiltshire. During restoration of our ancient parish church, a most dreadful discovery has been made behind the great east window. A compartment, long concealed, containing what appears to be human remains. The local constable is out of his depth, and the bishop himself has suggested your name. I implore you to come at once. The village is in turmoil, and there are those who would prefer the secret remain buried, literally. A room has been prepared at the vicarage, and the train from Paddington to Chippenham leaves at 11:07 tomorrow morning. I shall meet you personally. Yours in faith and fear, Reverend Dr. Augustus Vale, Vicar of St. Mary and All Saints Poirot, folded the letter with deliberate care. "Tiens," he murmured, "a body behind the stained glass. How very picturesque." He glanced at the ormolu clock on the mantel. It was already 4:30. There was much to arrange. By 7 o'clock the following morning, Poirot, immaculate in a charcoal overcoat, grey spats, and a Homburg hat tilted at precisely the correct angle, was seated in a first-class compartment of the Great Western Railway. George, his valet, had packed a small suitcase containing 3 changes of linen, a tin of crème de menthe pastille, and Poirot's favourite pocket edition of the Lives of the Saints. The detective himself carried only a leather document case and the letter from Reverend Vale, which he reread for the 7th time. The train hissed into Chippenham Station, beneath a sky the colour of wet slate. A tall, stooping figure in clerical black waited on the platform, clutching an umbrella like a shepherd's crook. His face was long, ascetic, the cheekbones sharp beneath a shock of iron-grey hair. When he saw Poirot, relief flooded his features. "Monsieur Poirot, Dr. Vale, Augustus Vale, words cannot express my gratitude." The vicar's voice was cultivated but trembling. "The motor car is this way. It is but 6 miles to St. Aldhelm, though the roads are villainous." The vicarage motor, a venerable Austin 12, lurched along sunken lanes, overhung with hazel and hawthorn. Poirot, wedged between a stack of hymnals and a box of ecclesiastical candles, observed his companion closely. The Reverend's fingers drummed incessantly on the steering wheel. Twice he began a sentence and abandoned it. "You will forgive the melodrama of my letter," Vale said at last. "But the discovery has shaken us all. The church, St. Mary and All Saints, dates to the 13th century. The east window is our glory. 15 panels of medieval glass, depicting the tree of Jesse. The central panel, the Virgin in Annunciation, was removed yesterday for cleaning. Behind it," he swallowed, "behind it was a recess, bricked up centuries ago, and inside, bones, a skeleton, fully dressed in modern clothing. A man, judging by the boots, and a wound to the skull that no fall could account for." Poirot's eyes gleamed. The clothing? Describe it. Corduroy trousers, a tweed jacket, a silk scarf knotted at the throat, all soaked in places with what one expects after time. But the scarf was bright, vermilion, almost new. Précisément. And the restoration, who oversees it? Mr. Felix Harrow, an architect from Bath, brilliant but temperamental. And Miss Lydia Trev-Thicker, the manor heiress, has funded the project. She is passionate about heritage. Then there is Mr. Septzold, the verger, who has served the church for 50 years. And young Mr. Blaise Rowan, the artist engaged to repaint the damaged tracery. He discovered the compartment. The Austin creaked to a halt before a lich gate draped in ivy. Beyond lay the church, flint walls, a squat Norman tower, and the great east window blazing even on this dull afternoon with shards of sapphire, ruby, and emerald. Poirot stepped out, inhaling air sharp with wood smoke and damp earth. The village itself clustered around the church like chicks about a hen. Thatched cottages, a post office with a single red telephone box, the Aldhelm Arms with its hanging sign depicting a mitred bishop. A knot of villagers watched from the war memorial, whispering behind gloved hands. Vale led Poirot through the south porch. The nave was dim, scented with beeswax and mildew. Scaffolding rose like a metal forest before the chancel. Dust sheets shrouded the pews. In the centre of the crossing stood a trestle table, laden with fragments of glass. Jewels of colour that caught the weak light and threw it back in fractured rainbows. Felix Harrow was there, a lean man in his 40s with a hawk's profile and paint-stained fingers. He wore a charcoal roll-neck sweater despite the chill. Beside him, arranging shards with reverent care, was a young woman in a bottle-green coat, her auburn hair twisted beneath a beret. Lydia Trev-Thicker, Poirot surmised. And hovering at the edge, twisting a cloth cap, was a stooped elderly man. Mr. Septzold, no doubt. Mr. Harrow, Vale called, voice echoing. Miss Trev-Thick, our guest has arrived. Harrow turned, eyes narrowing. So you're the famous Poirot. I expected someone taller. His tone carried the faint sneer of the aesthetic for the practical. Poirot smiled urbanely. Mon cher monsieur, it is not the height of the body, but the elevation of the mind that counts. Tell me, when precisely was the panel removed? Yesterday, 11 o'clock. Blaise, Mr. Rowan, was cleaning the lead cames. The mortar crumbled at a touch. He reached in to steady the frame, and Harrow gestured towards a tarpaulin-covered shape on the flagstones. Found that. Lydia Trev-Thicker stepped forward, extending a gloved hand. Her eyes were the colour of moss after rain. Monsieur Poirot, the village is in your debt. This church is my family's trust. Whatever darkness has been hidden here, it must be brought to light. Gently, if possible. Poirot bowed over her hand. Mademoiselle, darkness thrives in gentility as much as in brutality, but we shall proceed with a method. He approached the tarpaulin. With a nod to Vale, he drew it back. The skeleton lay on its side, knees drawn up as though in fetal prayer. The vermilion scarf gleamed obscenely bright against the brown bones. The skull had a neat triangular hole just above the left ear. Parbleu, Poirot whispered, a single blow, delivered with force and precision. The weapon, something narrow, pointed, an awl, perhaps, or a stonemason's chisel. He knelt, peering at the scarf. A monogram was embroidered in one corner. B.R. Blaise Rowan, Lydia said quickly. The artist. He lent his scarf to the workmen last week when the wind turned bitter. Poirot's gaze flicked to a workbench, where tools lay in neat rows. Chisels, lead knives, a small hammer with a triangular head. He straightened, dusting his knees. We shall speak with Monsieur Rowan presently. First, the window itself. They ascended the scaffolding. The east window towered above them, a cathedral of light even in daylight. The Virgin Mary gazed down, her robe a cascade of lapis lazuli, her halo studded with tiny silver stars. In the lower border, almost invisible unless one knew to look, was a row of tiny symbols. A chalice, a serpent, a broken wheel. Curious, Poirot murmured. These are not the usual Jessie Tree motifs. The broken wheel, that is Sainte Catherine, n'est-ce pas? But the serpent entwined about the chalice. Medieval symbolism can be obscure, Harrow said dismissively. The glass was salvaged from a dissolved abbey in 1540. Much was reset haphazardly. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Haphazardly, you say? Yet the lead lines are precise, the colours balanced. No, mon ami. This window was designed with intention, and intention, once concealed, has a habit of bleeding through. A sudden clatter made them turn. Blaise Rowan stood at the foot of the ladder paint, on his cuffs, his face the colour of parchment. He was barely 30, handsome in a Byronic way, but his eyes were haunted. I heard voices, he stammered. Dr. Vale said the detective had come. I wanted to explain about the scarf. Poirot descended with the agility of a cat. Monsieur Rowan, you discovered the compartment. Tell me everything, every detail, every sensation. Rowan swallowed. I was cleaning the Annunciation panel. The mortar was soft, almost powdery. I thought it odd. Centuries-old mortar should be iron-hard. When I pressed, a brick shifted. There was a hollow space behind. I reached in, and my fingers touched cloth. Then bone. He shuddered. I pulled back, and the whole section swung out like a door. He was just there, staring up at me with empty sockets. Did you recognize the clothing? No. I mean, the scarf was mine, but I'd lent it to anyone who needed it. Half the village has worn it. His voice cracked. The police think I put him there, but I swear. Calmez-vous, Poirot soothed. We deal in facts, not fears. The mortar, was it truly soft throughout, or only in one place? Rowan frowned. Only around that one brick. The rest was solid as rock. Interessant. Poirot turned to Harrow. And the scaffolding, has it been unattended at night? Locked, of course, but the key hangs in the vestry. Anyone might. Harrow stopped, aware of how that sounded. Twilight was gathering as Poirot stepped outside. The stained glass now glowed from within, lit by the setting sun, a jewelled promise against the encroaching dark. He stood beneath the lich gate, breathing deeply. Somewhere in the churchyard, a raven croaked. Vale joined him, pulling his coat tight. Will you stay at the vicarage tonight? Mrs. Puttock has prepared a room and a veal pie. Poirot smiled faintly. I accept with pleasure. But first, mon père, a question. This church, has it secrets beyond the architectural? Vale hesitated. Every ancient church has ghosts. Ours, well, there are stories of a medieval treasure hidden during the Reformation, and of a monk who vanished in 1539, the night the abbey was dissolved. Some say his bones lie beneath the high altar. Superstition, of course. Of course, Poirot echoed. But his eyes were on the east window, where the Virgin's face seemed almost to smile. Yet superstition, like stained glass, is often composed of fragments of truth, reassembled in dazzling patterns. As they walked towards the vicarage, Poirot's mind was already arranging those fragments. A vermilion scarf, a triangular wound, a brick that yielded too easily, and a window that had watched for 500 years. Somewhere behind the coloured light, death had waited patiently. And Hercule Poirot, with his little grey cells humming like a hive of industrious bees, intended to make it wait no longer. Chapter 2. Shadows in the Sanctuary. The church, door shut behind them, with the soft finality of a coffin lid. Inside, the air was colder than the November dusk outside, carrying the breath of centuries. Candle smoke, damp stone, and the faint iron tang of old blood. Poirot paused on the threshold, letting his eyes adjust. The nave stretched before him like a cavern of shadows, its vaulted roof lost in gloom. Only the east window still burned with borrowed daylight, its colours bleeding across the flagstones in fractured pools of ruby, sapphire, and gold. Reverend Vale fumbled with a switch. A single electric bulb sputtered to life above the chancel arch, throwing a sickly cone of light onto the scaffolding. The tarpaulin that had covered the skeleton now lay folded to one side. The bones had been removed to the vestry by the local constable, pending the coroner's arrival. Yet the space felt no less haunted. Poirot advanced slowly, his patent leather shoes whispering over the worn stones. He stopped beneath the great window and tilted his head back. From this angle, the Virgin Mary seemed to float above him, her glass face serene, her lapis robe rippling as though stirred by an unseen wind. The lower panels, those depicting the ancestors of Christ, were duller, their colours muted by centuries of grime. But one panel, directly beneath the Virgin's feet, caught his eye. A small roundel, no larger than a dinner plate, showing a serpent coiled around a chalice. The serpent's eyes were tiny chips of emerald, the chalice bled a single drop of crimson glass. "Curieux," Poirot murmured. "This roundel, it is not part of the original Jessie Tree sequence, no?" Felix Harrow, who had followed them in, gave a curt laugh. "You have a good eye, monsieur. It's a later insertion, 16th century probably. The glass is thinner, the leading coarser. We think it was added when the Abbey glass was reset here after the dissolution. Added by whom? Unknown. The churchwarden's accounts for 1548 mention divers popish fragments being decently placed. This was likely one." Harrow's tone was dismissive, but his fingers drummed on a scaffold pole. Poirot filed the detail away. He moved to the trestle table, where the removed panel lay face up like a patient on an operating table. The Virgin's glass was even more magnificent close to. Every fold of her robe painted with microscopic precision, the gold of her halo applied in delicate cross-hatching. But the reverse side, the side that had faced the hidden compartment, was blackened with soot and something darker. "Blood?" Vale asked nervously. "No, soot from centuries of candles, but observe," Poirot indicated a faint scratch near the lower edge. "A hairline fracture running through the blue glass of the Virgin's robe. This is recent. The panel was struck but not hard enough to shatter. A warning, perhaps." Lydia Trev Thicker, who had been silent until now, stepped forward. "The panel was intact when we began cleaning. I would have noticed damage. Yet damage there is," Poirot said. "And behind it, a man was concealed. Let us reconstruct the sequence." He climbed the scaffold with surprising nimbleness, Harrow steadying the ladder. From the top platform, the hidden compartment was visible, a rectangular void in the wall, roughly 2 feet by 3, lined with crumbling brick. The mortar around the single loose brick was pale and powdery, as Blaise Rowan had described. Poirot leaned in, sniffing delicately. "Plaster of Paris," he announced, "mixed with sand to mimic ancient mortar. Someone wished the repair to appear centuries old, yet be easily breached. By the killer." Vale's voice echoed hollowly. "Or by the one who discovered the body," Poirot corrected. "We must consider all possibilities." He descended and turned his attention to the floor beneath the window. The flagstones were uneven, worn into shallow depressions by generations of knees. But one stone, directly below the Virgin's panel, bore a fresh scar, a triangular gouge no longer than a thumbnail. Tiens, Poirot knelt, producing a magnifying glass from his pocket. The same shape as the wound in the skull. Our murder weapon perhaps used in haste and dropped. But no, the stone is merely chipped. The weapon was heavier. He straightened, brushing dust from his knees. Now the lighting. At night, this church is dark. Pitch black, Harrow said. The verger locks up at dusk. No electricity in the nave until the Restoration. Only candles in the side chapels. Yet someone worked here after dark, Poirot mused. The soot on the panel's reverse. Some is candle black, but some is lamp oil residue. Modern, within the last month. A sudden draught swept through the church, making the dust sheets billow like ghosts. The east window flared as a shaft of dying sunlight pierced the clouds, and for an instant the serpent roundel seemed to writhe. Poirot's shadow leapt across the wall, distorted into something monstrous. Lydia shivered. "We should lock up. The village is unsettled. There have been whispers." "Whispers are the currency of murder," Poirot said. "Let us spend a little." They gathered in the south transept, where a cluster of chairs had been arranged around a paraffin heater. Mr. Septsault, the verger, was persuaded to join them, his gnarled hands clutching a mug of tea as though it were a life raft. He was a small man, bent like a question mark, with eyes the colour of winter puddles. "Been verger here 52 year come Lady Day," he croaked. "Never seen the like. 'Tain't natural, stuffing a man behind the Virgin like a forgotten hymn book." "You locked the church each night?" Poirot asked. "Every night, sir. Key on a nail in the vestry. But," he hesitated, glancing at Vale, "Vicar sometimes forgets to lock the north door, and the choir boys, they're in and out, for practice. Anyone else with a key? Miss Lydia has one, for the Flower Guild. Mr. Harrow, too, for the works, and young Blaise. He was given one when he started the painting." Poirot's gaze flicked to Lydia. "You visited the church often, mademoiselle?" "Daily," she said steadily. "The restoration is my responsibility. I checked progress every afternoon." "And the night the panel was removed, where were you?" "At the manor. My housekeeper can confirm. I was hosting a meeting of the Wiltshire Archaeological Society." Harrow snorted. "Lydia's alibis are always impeccable. Mine, unfortunately, are not. I was in Bath until midnight, drinking with a supplier. The barman at the Star and Garter will remember. My companion spilled claret on his waistcoat." Poirot turned to Septsault. "And you, monsieur? Home by 8, like always. My sister keeps a strict house, but—" His voice dropped. "I saw a light in the church 2 nights before the discovery. Thought it was the vicar at prayer. Didn't like to disturb." Vale looked stricken. "It was not I." Silence fell, broken only by the heater's hiss. Outside, the first stars pricked the sky. Poirot rose and paced, his reflection sliding across the polished surface of a brass memorial tablet. "Let us consider the stained glass itself," he said. "Each panel tells a story. The Jesse tree, genealogy of Christ, but this serpent and chalice." He gestured towards the roundel. "In medieval iconography, the serpent often represents temptation, the chalice sacrifice. Together they suggest poison, or perhaps a specific poison, laudanum, monkshood." Lydia's eyes widened. "There's monkshood in the churchyard. The verger uses it to kill rats." Septsault nodded reluctantly. "Aconite, nasty stuff, but the bottle's locked in the shed." "Keys?" Poirot asked sharply. Same ring as the church. Anyone with access. Poirot clapped his hands once, the sound shockingly loud. Bien! We have means, opportunity, and thanks to the window, motive beginning to shimmer like light through glass. But we need more. Monsieur Harrow, the scaffolding logs. Who was working here the week before the discovery? Harrow produced a ledger from his coat. Blaise Rowan every day painting. 2 labourers from Chippenham. Honest men, gone back to their wives. Myself, 3 evenings. Lydia, twice. The vicar, daily for Complin. And the hidden compartment, its construction. Medieval, Harrow said. The wall is 4 feet thick there. Norman masonry. The recess was likely a reliquary niche, bricked up during the Reformation to hide Catholic treasures. Or to hide something less holy, Poirot said softly. He moved to the Lady Chapel, where a side window depicted St. Catherine with her wheel. The glass here was clearer, the colours more vivid. In the lower border, almost invisible, was another anomaly. A tiny figure of a monk, hands raised in blessing, or warning. His face had been deliberately scratched out. Regardez, Poirot breathed. Someone wished this monk to remain anonymous. Yet his robe is Benedictine, black, not the grey of the Cistercians who held the abbey. Curious. Vale crossed himself. There are stories of a black monk who haunted the dissolution, said to have cursed the commissioners who took the abbey's gold, the treasure I mentioned yesterday. Some say it was never found. Gold, Poirot repeated. Always gold, or the promise of it. Tell me, mon père, has anyone shown unusual interest in the church's history lately? Vale hesitated. Young Blaise. He's been researching the dissolution for his paintings. Spent hours in the muniment room. And Miss Lydia's archaeological group. They've been excavating the cloister garth. Lydia flushed. Purely academic. We found only potsherds and a medieval shoe. Yet shoes, like scars, can tell stories, Poirot said. He glanced at his watch. It grows late. Tomorrow we examine the vestry, the crypt, and Monsieur Rowan's studio. Tonight, he smiled at Vale. Tonight, I accept your veal pie with gratitude, and perhaps a small glass of your excellent sherry. As they filed out, Poirot lingered. The church was fully dark now, the stained glass reduced to opaque black silhouettes. But as the door closed, a flicker of movement caught his eye, high in the clerestory, where a small ventilation grill looked onto the roof. For an instant, he thought he saw a pale face pressed against the bars. Then it was gone. He stepped into the night, the wind whipping his coat. Somewhere in the churchyard, an owl hooted. The east window, now lit from within by the single bulb, glowed like a beacon, and in its heart the serpent roundel seemed to wink. Poirot pulled his collar up. Patience, he told the darkness. The shadows lengthen, but the light always returns. Behind him, the church door creaked, as though something inside had leaned against it, listening. Chapter 3. The body behind the Virgin. The vestry smelled of mothballs, candle wax, and the sour ghost of incense, long extinguished. A single green-shaded lamp threw a pool of light onto a deal table, where the skeleton lay arranged with clinical neatness. Skull, ribcage, pelvis, long bones, the smaller bones of hands and feet stacked like ivory dominoes. The vermilion scarf had been folded into an evidence bag. The clothes, corduroy trousers stiff with grime, tweed jacket sprouting green mould, hung from a coat stand like the sloughed skin of a serpent. Dr. Meredith, the police surgeon from Chippenham, was a stout man with a walrus moustache, and the weary eyes of one who has seen too many quiet villages hide violent hearts. He greeted Poirot with a nod that managed to be both deferential and resentful. Coroner's coming tomorrow, but I've done the preliminaries. Male, 30 to 35 years. Death by single blow to the left temporal region. Triangular weapon, three-sided sharp. Penetrated the skull and lacerated the middle meningeal artery. Instantaneous, or near enough, no defensive wounds. Poirot leaned over the table, gloved fingers hovering. Time of death. Hard to fix. The compartment acted as a dry cupboard. Cool, no insects. Rigor long gone, adiposa just beginning. Clothing's the best guide. The scarf's silk, dyed with modern aniline crimson. The jacket label is Jaeger, 1951 season. I'd say 2 to 3 years, no more. Précisément, Poirot murmured. Murdered elsewhere, conveyed here, concealed. The body was not meant to rot, but to wait. He lifted the skull gently. The triangular hole gaped like a third eye. The weapon, your thoughts? Stonemason's plugging chisel, maybe. Or a glazier's diamond on a heavy handle. Something from the Restoration, certainly. Meredith indicated a tray of smaller finds. A brass collar stud, 2 shillings and a 6pence, dated 1950. A broken fountain pen leaking indigo ink, and a single cufflink, gold, engraved with the initials C. St. J. Poirot's eyebrows rose. C. St. J., not B.R. The scarf was borrowed then. The victim is not our artist. Reverend Vale, who had been hovering by the door, crossed himself. God rest him, but who is he? That, said Poirot, is what the little grey cells must discover. They moved into the Lady Chapel, where morning light now poured through the St. Catherine window, painting the altar cloth in wheels of scarlet and emerald. Constable Bragg, a gangling youth with earnest eyes, had arrived to take statements. Poirot dismissed him with instructions to photograph the cufflink and circulate the description. Male, 5'10", fair hair, few strands adhering to scalp. Gold cufflinks monogrammed, there she ish Saint she. Lydia Trev Thicker entered as Bragg departed, carrying a tray of coffee and digestive biscuits. She had exchanged yesterday's green coat for a charcoal skirt, and twin set, a single pearl at her throat. Grief had etched faint lines around her eyes, but her voice was steady. I've telephoned the manor staff. No one recognizes the initials, but, she hesitated, there was a visitor 2 summers ago, Charles St. John Barrington, second son of Lord Barrington of Dorset. He came to sketch the church for a book on medieval glass, stayed at the Aldhelm Arms, then vanished. The landlord thought he'd gone to France. Poirot sipped his coffee. Excellent, strong. Vanished when? August Bank Holiday, 1951. He paid his bill, left his luggage to be forwarded, and was seen walking towards the Downs. Never arrived at the station. Tiens, and his description. Tall, fair, charming, wore expensive tweeds, always sketching. Lydia's fingers tightened on her cup. He flirted with everyone, harmlessly. Even old Mrs. Puttock blushed. Poirot turned to Vale. The church, open that night? Evensong finished at 7. I locked both doors myself, but the north door latch was faulty then. Septimus was always complaining. They returned to the chancel. The scaffolding had been partly dismantled. The Virgin panel lay on trestles, wrapped in cotton wool. Blaise Rowan was there, mixing pigments on a palette, his face gaunt in the cold light. He flinched when Poirot approached. I swear the scarf was mine, he blurted. I lent it to anyone who was cold. Charles, Mr. Barrington, borrowed it the day he disappeared. Said he was walking to the stone circle and the wind was bitter. Poirot studied the young man. Paint stained his cuffs. Cobalt, vermilion, gold leaf. His eyes were red-rimmed. Whether from grief or guilt was hard to tell. You were fond of him? Rowan's laugh was brittle. Everyone was. He had presents, bought drinks, told stories of Monte Carlo, promised to take my sketches to a London gallery. He looked at the wrapped panel. I should have noticed the mortar was wrong. I touched it every day." "Yet you did not," Poirot said gently. "Because the repair was skilful. Tell me, did Monsieur Barrington speak of the church's secrets, the treasure?" Rowan's eyes flicked to Lydia, then away. "He laughed at the stories, said monks hid gold in the strangest places, behind altars, inside bells, but he was excited about the east window, kept measuring the tracery, muttering about displaced panels." Felix Harrow, who had been listening from the shadows, stepped forward. Barrington was an amateur. His measurements were sloppy, but he produced a folded sheet from his pocket. "I found this in the muniment room yesterday, tucked inside a 1548 inventory. It was a pencil sketch, hastily done, the east window as it now appeared, but with the serpent roundel circled and annotated in a cultured hand. Displacement 3 1/2 inches left of centre." Check reverse. Poirot's eyes gleamed. He suspected the window had been altered, and 3 days later he vanished. They moved to the scaffold. With Harrow's help, Poirot examined the wall behind the Virgin's panel. The bricks of the compartment were medieval, but one course, directly behind the serpent roundel, showed mortar of a slightly different colour, paler, with tiny air bubbles. "Plaster again," Harrow confirmed, "but older, 20th century. Someone opened this niche before the current restoration." Poirot traced the mortar with a fingertip, and resealed it carelessly. "Our killer, perhaps, in haste, or—" His voice dropped. "Barrington himself, searching for the treasure, and interrupted." Lydia gasped. "You think he was murdered for what he found?" "Or for what he might have found," Poirot corrected. "The cufflink, gold, valuable, yet left on the body. The killer was not a thief. No, the motive was silence." He climbed down and addressed the group. "We must search the church for traces of the murder itself. Blood, fibres, the weapon. Constable Bragg will assist. Monsieur Rowan, your studio. I wish to see every sketch Barrington made." Rowan led them across the churchyard to a stable converted into a studio. Sunlight slanted through a skylight. Illuminating chaos. Easels, jars of brushes, the sharp smell of turpentine. On a table lay a portfolio labelled St. Aldhelm, summer 1951. Poirot opened it. Sketch after sketch of the east window, each more detailed. The final page showed the serpent roundel enlarged, with measurements and a note. "Glass thinner here. Possible hollow behind. Need diamond cutter." Rowan stared. "He never told me he planned to cut the glass." "Because he feared interruption," Poirot said, "or because he trusted no one." Back in the church, the search began. Septsalt shuffled along the pews with the torch. Lydia checked the flower room. Harrow and Vale tackled the crypt stairs. Poirot himself examined the high altar, running gloved fingers along the reredo's carvings. Beneath the altar cloth, in the dust of centuries, he found it. A single drop of blood, dried almost black, no larger than a pinhead. And beside it, a flake of gold leaf, modern, bright. He straightened, triumphant. The murder was here in the sanctuary. Barrington was struck down at the altar, perhaps praying, perhaps prying. The killer dragged him to the scaffold, concealed him behind the Virgin. But in haste, a drop of blood fell, and a fragment of the treasure, gold leaf from a reliquary, clung to the corpse. Vale's face was ashen. Desecration. Oui, but also revelation. The treasure exists, and someone killed to protect it. As they gathered in the nave, the bell tolled noon. Sunlight poured through the east window, and for a moment the serpent's emerald eyes seemed to glow with malevolent life. Poirot looked up at the Virgin's serene face and spoke softly. "Madame, you have kept your secret well. But Hercule Poirot, he keeps secrets only until the truth demands otherwise. Outside, the village waited, curtains twitching, whispers rising like smoke. The body had a name now, Charles St. John Barrington, and with a name came motive, sharp as the weapon that had ended him. But the killer, Poirot reflected, as he watched a crow settle on the lich gate, still walked beneath the fractured light, believing the stained glass had sealed their sin forever. Chapter 4. Whispers of the Forgotten Crypt. The iron-bound door to the crypt groaned open like a confession long withheld. A breath of cold, fetid air rolled up the stone stairs. Earth, rot, and the mineral tang of standing water. Poirot paused on the top step, handkerchief pressed to his nose, his neat figure silhouetted against the nave's grey light. Behind him, Reverend Vale clutched a storm lantern. Its yellow flame jittered across centuries of graffiti scratched into the walls. Lover's initials, Egicheto. Crude sketch of a hanged man. The date, 1643. Mind the third step, Vale warned. It's crumbled since the war. The crypt hasn't been opened in 20 years, not since old Canon Makepeace was buried down here. Poirot descended with caution, each footfall echoing. The stairs spiraled tightly, the walls sweating green lichen. At the bottom, the lantern revealed a low barrel-vaulted chamber, no larger than a modest drawing-room. 4 pillars, black with age, supported the weight of the church above. In the centre, a stone sarcophagus, its lid carved with a worn effigy of a knight, hands folded in prayer, stood like a silent sentinel. Along the walls, shallow niches held coffins in various states of collapse. Oak planks silvered with mould, brass plates green with verdigris. Mon Dieu, Poirot murmured, a most exclusive address for the dead. Vale set the lantern on the sarcophagus. Shadows leapt and crouched. The Trev-Thicker family vault is to the east, Lydia's ancestors. The west wall is older, parish worthies from the 14th century, and beneath the floor, he tapped a flagstone with his shoe, the charnel pit, bones cleared from the churchyard in 1782, thousands jumbled together. Poirot's eyes gleamed. And the treasure? Where would a desperate monk hide gold in 1539? Vale pointed to a bricked-up archway in the north wall, its mortar pale and new-looking. That led to the abbey cloister before the church was shortened, sealed in 1850 after subsidence. The story says the monks walled up their reliquaries there, gold chalices, gemmed crosses, rather than surrender them to Henry's commissioners. Poirot approached the arch. The bricks were Victorian, machine-made, but the mortar between the lowest course was different, crumbly, almost sandy. He scraped with a penknife. Plaster dust drifted down like dandruff. Again the false mortar, he said. Someone has been here recently. Vale's face blanched. Impossible. The only key is on the vestry ring. Keys, Poirot reminded gently, are made to be copied. They searched methodically. Vale lifted coffin lids with reverence, revealing shrouds turned to lace, skulls grinning in eternal surprise. Poirot examined the sarcophagus. The knight's effigy had lost its nose centuries ago, but the stone plinth beneath was scarred with fresh chisel marks, triangular, identical to the wound in Barrington's skull. "Regardez," Poirot breathed. He ran gloved fingers over the marks. 3 blows, delivered in anger. The killer tested the weapon here before using it above. Beneath the sarcophagus, half hidden by cobwebs, lay a scrap of modern paper, a torn corner of a cigarette packet, player's navy cut. On the blank side, someone had scrawled in pencil, "See St. J. 3rd pane, reverse, gold leaf trace." Poirot's pulse quickened. Barrington was here. He found something. Vale lifted the lantern higher. In the improved light, they saw footprints in the dust. 2 sets. One small, neat, the imprint of a woman's court shoe. The other larger, the ridged sole of a workman's boot. Both led to the bricked arch and back. "Lydia," Vale whispered. "And Harrow, or Septsault," Poirot said. "He wears heavy boots, but let us not leap to conclusions." They turned to the arch. Poirot pressed his shoulder against the bricks. They shifted slightly, a hollow thud behind. "The wall is thin here, no more than 1 brick's depth. Bring the chisel from the vestry." Vale hesitated, then climbed the stairs. While he was gone, Poirot explored the charnel pit. A rusted iron grate covered a square opening in the floor. He lifted it with effort. Beneath lay a tangle of bones, femurs, tibiae, skulls staring up with empty sockets. But among them, something glinted. A small gold object, no larger than a thumbnail. He fished it out with a penknife. It was a fragment of gold leaf, beaten thin, still adhering to a scrap of decayed wood. Medieval gilding, undoubtedly. And caught in the leaf's edge, a single human hair, fair, almost blonde. "Barrington's," Poirot murmured. "He was here, prying at the wall, and lost this in the struggle." Vale returned with a cold chisel and lump hammer. Together they attacked the mortar. It crumbled easily, revealing a cavity no deeper than a bread box. Inside lay a leather folio, swollen with damp, its ties rotted. Poirot lifted it reverently. The folio contained manuscripts, vellum sheets, Latin text in a spidery monastic hand. The top page bore an illumination. The same serpent and chalice symbol from the east window, executed in vermilion and gold. Beneath, a list, Reliquiae Sanctae Crucis, in Calis Oreo Caput Sancti Aldhelmi, in Pixide Argentea, Tres Cruces Gematae, in Pariete Orientali. Poirot translated softly. Fragment of the true cross, in a golden chalice. Head of St. Aldhelm, in a silver pyx. 3 jewelled crosses in the east wall. Vale crossed himself. The treasure, it was real, but not all of it, Poirot said. He turned the pages. The final sheet was modern, typing paper, water-stained. A carbon copy of a letter, "My dear C, the east wall is the key." The third pane from the left, reverse side, shows gold leaf beneath the paint. "I have the diamond cutter. Meet me in the crypt, midnight, August 3rd. Come alone. The monk's gold will make us rich beyond dreams. Burn this." F. Poirot's eyes narrowed. F. Felix Harrow, or another? Vale looked stricken. Harrow was in Bath that night. His alibi. Alibis, Poirot said, are like stained glass. Beautiful, but fragile when struck in the right place. They climbed back to the nave, the folio wrapped in Vale's cassock. Sunlight now blazed through the east window, and the third pane from the left, the one showing Jessie reclining beneath the vine, glowed with particular intensity. Poirot studied it closely. The paint on the reverse side did appear thicker, as though something had been concealed beneath. He turned to Vale. "We must remove this panel, carefully, but first the hair." He placed the gold fragment in an envelope. "Constable Bragg will send it to the yard for comparison with Barrington's family." As they emerged into the churchyard, Lydia Trev-Thicker was waiting by the lich gate, her face pale beneath a black beret. She held a small bunch of Michaelmas daisies. "I heard noises below," she said. "Is it safe?" Poirot bowed. "Mademoiselle, safety is an illusion in a house of secrets. But tell me, your shoes, size 4, n'est-ce pas? The print in the crypt is yours." Lydia's hand flew to her throat. I went down last week, looking for a medieval floor tile for the Archaeological Society. The dust was thick, I left prints, that's all. And the workman's boot beside yours? That could be anyone, except Salt, the labourers. Her voice trembled. Monsieur Poirot, my family has guarded this church for centuries. If there is treasure, it belongs to the nation, not to thieves. Yet someone believed it belonged to them, Poirot said, and killed to keep it. He watched her closely. Fear, yes, but also calculation. The heiress was playing a deeper game. That afternoon, Poirot interviewed Septsalt in the verger's cottage. The old man sat hunched over a cup of cocoa, his rheumy eyes darting. "Never trusted that Barrington," he muttered. "Flash gent, always asking about the old monks. Said he'd buy me a pint if I showed him the crypt. I told him it were locked." "But you have a key," Poirot prompted. "On the ring, aye, but I never took it off the nail." Septsalt's fingers worried at his cap. "Though, young Blaise borrowed it once to fetch a hassock. And Miss Lydia, she's had her own key since she were a girl." Poirot leaned forward. "The night of August 3rd, 1951, where were you?" "Asleep by 9, like always. My sister'll tell you, but—" He lowered his voice. "I heard footsteps in the churchyard past midnight. Thought it were badgers. Then a scream, cut off sudden. I looked out, but the mist were thick." "A scream," Poirot repeated. "Man or woman? Hard to say. Short, like surprise. Then nothing." Poirot thanked him and stepped into the dusk. The church windows were dark now, but as he passed the east end, he noticed something odd. The third pane, the Jessie pane, glowed faintly from within, as though a light burned behind the glass. He tried the north door. It was locked, but the latch, as Vale had said, was faulty. A sharp tug and it gave. Inside, the nave was pitch black save for that single glow high above. Poirot moved silently to the scaffold and climbed. The light came from a small electric torch wedged behind the Jessie pane. Someone had been here today, examining the reverse. Fresh fingerprints smudged the lead cames. A scrap of gold leaf fluttered to the platform like a dying moth. Poirot pocketed it. Then, carefully, he prized the pane loose. The glass was heavier than expected, because beneath the paint layer something was embedded. A thin sheet of gold, hammered into the glass itself, bearing the faint outline of a cross. The treasure. Not a chest of gold, but the east window itself, panels gilded on the reverse, invisible unless you knew where to look. Worth a fortune to collectors, priceless to the church. But one panel was missing its gold. The Virgin's panel, behind which Barrington had been hidden, showed only bare glass where the leaf had been scraped away. Poirot's mind raced. The killer had removed the gold after the murder, using the hidden body as a distraction. But why leave the rest? Because they were interrupted, he realized. By Blaise Rowan, perhaps, arriving early for work, or by the screams Septsalt heard. He descended, the pane cradled carefully. In the nave, a shadow detached itself from the pillars. Felix Harrow, his face gaunt in the torchlight. "You've found it," Harrow said flatly. "The gold in the glass. Barrington's holy grail." Poirot faced him. "You wrote the letter, n'est-ce pas? F for Felix. You lured him here with promises of riches." Harrow's laugh was bitter. "I lured him, yes, but I didn't kill him. He was alive when I left, gloating over the gold he'd scraped from the Virgin's panel. Said he'd sell it in Paris, buy a villa in Capri. I told him the church would notice. He laughed, said the church had hidden it for 400 years. What was one more secret? And then I heard footsteps on the stairs, someone coming down to the crypt. I panicked, fled through the north door. When I returned the next day, Barrington was gone. I thought he'd taken the gold and run." "But he had not run," Poirot said softly. He had been silenced. And the gold, where is it now? Harrow's eyes flickered. I don't know. I swear. Poirot studied him. The architect's hands were trembling, but his gaze was steady. Truth or the performance of a lifetime. As Harrow left, Poirot stood alone beneath the east window. The remaining gold glowed faintly, a secret shining through centuries of deception. Somewhere in the village, a killer still believed the treasure was theirs. But Hercule Poirot, with the little grey cells humming like a cathedral organ, was beginning to see the pattern in the fractured light. Chapter 5. Fractured Light and Hidden Lies. The morning was sharp with frost, the churchyard grass crunching beneath Poirot's polished shoes like brittle sugar. Inside St. Mary and All Saints, the air felt charged, as though the very stones anticipated revelation. Scaffolding creaked overhead. Dust motes danced in the slanted light that poured through the east window. The Jessie pane, now carefully re-leaded after Poirot's discovery of the gold, glowed, with innocent beauty, its secret once again concealed behind centuries of paint and grime. Felix Harrow stood on the top platform, directing two labourers from Chippenham as they manoeuvred a new sheet of protective plywood over the Virgin's panel. His voice was clipped, his movements precise, but Poirot noted the tremor in his left hand whenever it brushed the scaffold pole. "Doucement," Harrow called. "Mind the leading, those cames are 16th century." Poirot waited below, gloved hands clasped behind his back. Constable Bragg hovered nearby, notebook open, face flushed with the importance of his duties. Reverend Vale had retreated to the vicarage to compose a sermon he would never deliver. Lydia Trevthick had telephoned to say she was delayed at the manor, something about an archaeological catalogue. Only Blaise Rowan was present, perched on a pew with his sketchbook, charcoal flying across the page in nervous arcs. Poirot clapped once. "Monsieur, we proceed with the restoration, but under my supervision. Today we examine the third pane from the right, King David with his harp. Monsieur Harrow believes it too, may conceal gold." Harrow descended the ladder with the agility of a much younger man. "I measured it last night," he said defensively. "The glass is thicker by 2 millimeters, same as the Jessie pane." "Précisément," Poirot agreed. "But measurement is not proof. We must see." The labourers lifted the David panel from its temporary cradle. It was heavier than expected. One man staggered, and the glass tilted dangerously. A collective gasp rose as the lower corner struck the scaffold rail. Crack. The sound was small, almost polite, but it echoed like a gunshot in the vaulted nave. A hairline fracture raced across the harpist's robe, emerald glass splintering into a spiderweb of green. From the heart of the fracture, something glinted. A sliver of gold, no larger than a fingernail, winking like a trapped star. "Mon Dieu," Poirot breathed. "It is true. The entire east window is a reliquary." Harrow swore under his breath and leapt to steady the panel. As he did, the fractured section gave way entirely. A triangular shard, 3 inches long, razor-sharp, fell with a crystalline chime, embedding point first in the wooden platform. Poirot stared at it, transfixed. The shape was identical to the wound in Charles Barrington's skull. Bragg fumbled for his whistle. "That's the weapon. Has to be." "No," Poirot said softly. "A replica, perhaps, but observe," he lifted the shard with a handkerchief. The edges were fresh, the gold leaf on the inner surface pristine. This glass was painted on the reverse, then gilded. The fracture exposed the gold beneath. Our murder weapon was similar, but older, dulled by use. Rowan had gone white. "You're saying the killer broke a panel to make the weapon?" "Or had one already broken," Poirot corrected. "Glass is, Fragile, but in skilled hands, lethal. Harrow's face was a study in controlled panic. The David panel was intact when we started, I swear it. Poirot's eyes narrowed, yet someone struck it. Deliberately, with force. The angle of the blow, he mimed a downward chop. From above, a tall man, or someone on the scaffold. The labourers exchanged uneasy glances. One, Jenkins, a burly man with a chipped front tooth, spoke up. "We was both in the pub last night, sir. Rose and Crown, till closing." "Witnesses?" Bragg demanded. "Half the village," the other labourer muttered. Poirot dismissed them with a wave. "Monsieur Rowan, your movements?" The artist closed his sketchbook with a snap. "I was here until 7, mixing vermilion. Then I walked to the manor. Miss Lydia needed a drawing for the catalogue. I left at 10. "Alone?" Rowan hesitated. "Septimus saw me go. He was locking up." Poirot turned to the scaffold. The platform where the shard had fallen was at eye level for a man of Harrow's height. He climbed up, examining the rail. A faint scratch marred the wood. Fresh, pale against the darker grain. "Regardez!" he called down. "The panel was struck here, against the rail, not an accident. Someone held the glass and smashed it deliberately." Harrow's voice floated up, strained. "Why? To create a weapon? But Barrington was killed 2 years ago." "Exactement," Poirot said, "which tells us the killer feared discovery now. The restoration threatened to reveal the gold, so they staged an accident, a broken panel to explain the missing shard, should it ever be needed as evidence." He descended, the glass fragment wrapped carefully in his handkerchief. But they were careless. The gold leaf is modern, electroplated, not beaten. A forgery, slipped behind the paint during a previous repair. Rowan's eyes widened. "I restored the David panel in 1949, after a storm cracked it. I used commercial gold leaf, but I never—" "Jamais," Poirot interrupted. "You are not the forger. But someone used your repair as cover." They gathered in the Lady Chapel, where the light was softer. Poirot laid the shard on the altar cloth like a sacrificial offering. "Let us reconstruct," he said. "Barrington discovers the gold in 1951. He scrapes a sample from the Virgin's panel, perhaps with a diamond cutter. He is interrupted, struck down with a similar shard taken from another damaged panel. The killer hides the body, reseals the compartment with plaster, and waits. 2 years pass. The restoration begins. Panic. They return, break the David panel to create a duplicate weapon, confusing the trail." Bragg scratched his head. "But the original weapon, where is it?" Poirot's smile was thin. "Disposed of, mon ami. Melted in a glazier's kiln, perhaps. Or—" his gaze drifted to the font, where a thin layer of ice had formed overnight. "Buried in holy ground." Lydia Trevthicker arrived then, breathless, cheeks pink from the cold. She carried a leather folio stamped with the Wiltshire Archaeological Society crest. "I'm sorry I'm late," she said. "I found this in the Manor Library. Grandfather's notes on the 1890 restoration." She opened it to a page marked with a ribbon. He wrote, "East window releaded by Mr. Esalt of Bath. Several panels found to contain thin gold sheets beneath paint. Removed and sold to fund new organ. Proceeds 47 Faustus 360. Harrow snatched the folio. "Salt, my great-uncle! He was the architect then!" Poirot took the page gently. So the treasure was already plundered. What Barrington found was the remnant, perhaps a single panel overlooked. Worth little to a museum, but enough to tempt a greedy man. Lydia's voice was small. "Then why kill him?" "Because," Poirot said, "he threatened to expose the theft. The church's reputation, the village's pride, ruined. And for the killer, perhaps a personal stake." Rowan stood abruptly. "I need air." He strode towards the south door, but Poirot's voice stopped him. "Un moment, Monsieur Rowan. Your affair with Miss Trevthicker. It is known in the village." Lydia gasped. Rowan froze. "It wasn't brief," he said at last. "Summer of 1951. Charles teased me about it. Said Lydia deserved better than a penniless artist. I thought he was joking." Lydia's eyes filled with tears. He was joking. Charles flirted with everyone. It meant nothing. Poirot watched them both. Yet jealousy is a powerful motive. "And you, Monsieur Harrow, your great-uncle's theft. Did you fear exposure?" Harrow's laugh was hollow. "I knew nothing of it until today, but yes, if the gold was traced to my family." He trailed off. Poirot turned to the altar. The fractured shard lay between them like a shard of truth. He picked it up, holding it to the light. The gold leaf caught the sun, throwing a distorted reflection onto the wall. A crooked cross, a broken harp. "Regardez," he said softly. "Even in fracture, the pattern emerges, but we need the final piece." He slipped the shard into an envelope. "Constable Bragg, send this to the yard with the hair from the crypt and the cigarette packet. We seek a smoker of player's navy cut, not common in the village." Bragg saluted and departed. The others stood in awkward silence as the church bell tolled 3. Poirot addressed them collectively. "Tonight, we set a trap. The killer believes the gold is still hidden. We will give them one more chance to claim it." He outlined the plan. The church locked at dusk, but the north door left on the latch. A single light burning behind the east window. Poirot and Bragg concealed in the crypt. The others to remain at home. Alibis absolute. As they dispersed, Poirot lingered. He climbed the scaffold one last time, examining the David panel's fracture. Beneath the broken harp, someone had carved a tiny symbol into the lead, a serpent devouring its tail, the Ouroboros, eternity, or a warning. He traced it with a gloved finger. "Patience," he murmured to the empty church. "The light fractures, but the truth, it reassembles." Outside, the frost was melting under a weak sun. Footprints crisscrossed the churchyard path, some fresh, some old. Poirot followed one set to the north door, where the latch hung loose. A single vermilion thread, silk from Blaise Rowan's scarf, caught on the iron hasp. He plucked it free, tucking it into his waistcoat pocket. The web was tightening strand by crimson strand. In the vestry, he found Septsolt polishing the Lecton Bible with trembling hands. "You saw young Rowan leave last night?" Poirot asked. The verger nodded. 10 o'clock, near enough, but he hesitated. Miss Lydia followed him 5 minutes later, wrapped in a dark cloak. I thought she was going to the manor. Poirot's eyes gleamed. And did she return? Not by the gate, but the north door. Sometimes it sticks open. "Merci," Poirot said. "You have been most helpful." As he left, the church felt smaller, the shadows deeper. The stained glass windows watched him go, their colours bleeding into twilight, saints and sinners, serpents and chalices, all waiting for the final pane to fall. Chapter 6. The Midnight Vigil. The church clock struck 11 with the solemnity of a funeral bell. St. Aldhelm lay hushed under a thin November moon. The village windows shuttered, the Aldhelm Arms dark for the first time in living memory. Only the east window of St. Mary and All Saints glowed faintly. A single electric bulb burning behind the Virgin's panel, like a votive candle in a tomb. Hercule Poirot crouched in the crypt, back against the cold sarcophagus, overcoat buttoned to the throat. Constable Bragg sat opposite, knees drawn up, revolver on his lap, though Poirot had forbidden its use. The lantern between them was hooded to a slit. Its beam picked out the bricked archway, and the faint footprints still visible in the dust. "Silencement," Poirot whispered. "The trap is baited. We wait." He had left the north door on the latch, the keyring dangling invitingly in the vestry. On the scaffold platform, the Jessie pane had been loosened, just enough for a gloved hand to slip behind and touch the gold. A note, typed on the vicarage Remington, lay folded beneath the panel. "The gold is yours. Take it tonight. Come alone. Burn this." Hours crawled. The crypt smelled of earth and candle smoke. Water dripped somewhere with monastic patience. Bragg's breathing grew ragged. Poirot's eyes never left the stairwell. At 12:07, a creak echoed above, the north door. Soft footsteps crossed the nave, deliberate, unhurried. A silhouette appeared at the top of the crypt stairs, tall, cloaked, face obscured by a dark scarf. The figure paused, listening, then descended with the confidence of familiarity. Poirot's hand closed over Bragg's wrist. "Wait!" The intruder carried a small torch. Its beams swept the chamber, lingered on the bricked arch, then moved to the sarcophagus. A gloved hand brushed the chisel marks Poirot had discovered. The figure knelt, produced a jemmy from beneath the cloak, and attacked the mortar with practiced efficiency. Bricks shifted, dust sifted down like grave soil. Poirot rose silently. "Assez," he said, voice cutting the darkness like a scalpel. "The game is up, mon ami." The torch spun, blinding. Bragg lunged, but the intruder was faster, jemmy swinging in a vicious arc. It caught the constable on the temple. He crumpled with a groan. Poirot ducked as the tool whistled over his head, striking sparks from the pillar. "Imbecile!" Poirot snapped, seizing a loose brick and hurling it. It struck the intruder's shoulder. The torch clattered, rolled, went out. Darkness swallowed them. Breathing harsh, the scrape of boots on stone. Poirot backed against the sarcophagus, ears straining. A sudden rush, hands clawing for his throat. He twisted, using the intruder's momentum to fling them against the charnel pit grate. Iron rang, a curse, male, muffled by the scarf. Poirot fumbled for the lantern, flipped the hood. Light flared. The intruder sprawled half across the grate, cloak torn, scarf askew. Felix Harrow's hawk face stared up, eyes wild, a trickle of blood at his lip. "You," Poirot said softly. Harrow scrambled up, jemmy raised. "Stay back. The gold is mine, my great-uncle's legacy. Non." Poirot stepped between him and the stairs. "Your great-uncle stole it in 1890. You discovered the truth when Barrington began asking questions. You lured him here with promises, then killed him when he threatened exposure." Harrow's laugh was ragged. "He was greedy, said he'd go to the bishop unless I cut him in. I struck him with the shard I'd prepared, glass from a cracked panel, wrapped in lead for weight. One blow, he fell like a sack." Bragg stirred, groaning. Harrow glanced at him, then at the stairs. Poirot moved to block. "You hid the body behind the Virgin," Poirot continued, voice calm, relentless. "Resealed the compartment with plaster, but the restoration, that you could not stop. So you broke the David panel yesterday, planted modern gold leaf to confuse the trail." Harrow's eyes darted. "Clever little man, but you'll never prove—" A new sound cut him off. Footsteps on the stairs, rapid, light. Lydia Trevthicke appeared, lantern in hand, face pale as moonlight. "Felix," she whispered, "what have you done?" Harrow's face twisted. "Stay out of this, Lydia." She descended, eyes on Poirot. I saw the light from the manor. I knew the trap. Her gaze fell on Bragg, then the jemmy. "You killed Charles." "He was a parasite," Harrow spat. "Flirting with you, charming the village all out, while planning to strip the church bare. I did it for St. Aldhelm, for us." Lydia's voice shook. "There was no us. You imagined it." Harrow lunged, not at Poirot, but at Lydia. She screamed as the jemmy arced down. Poirot shoved her aside. The tool glanced off his shoulder, pain flaring. He grappled with Harrow, two men locked in a desperate dance above the charnel pit. Bragg staggered up, revolver raised. "Drop it!" Harrow froze. The jemmy clattered to the stones. Lydia backed against the wall, hands over her mouth. Poirot straightened, breathing hard. "Constable, cuffs!" Bragg snapped them on. Harrow sagged, defiance leaking away like air from a punctured tire. "It was perfect," he muttered. "The body hidden, the gold safe. Then you came." Poirot adjusted his torn coat. "Perfection, mon ami, is the enemy of detection. You left too many fragments. The plaster, the cigarette packet, the vermilion thread on the latch, and the scream Septsault heard. That was Barrington, realizing your betrayal." Lydia found her voice. "The gold in the David panel, the forgery, planted last night," Poirot confirmed, "while you, mademoiselle, followed Blaise to the manor. Your alibi holds. But you suspected Harrow, no? That is why you came tonight." She nodded, tears glittering. "He asked too many questions about the 1890 restoration. I found his great-uncle's ledger in the muniment room. Entries for gold leaf sold. I confronted him. He laughed, said it was ancient history." Harrow was led up the stairs, head bowed. Moonlight flooded the nave as they emerged. The east window blazed, the Virgin's face serene above the chaos. Poirot paused beneath it, touching the loosened Jessie pane. "One final piece," he said. He reached behind the glass and withdrew a small oilskin packet. Inside, a single sheet of gold leaf, medieval, beaten thin as spider silk, and a folded note in Barrington's elegant hand. "To whoever finds this, the church is robbed. The gold belongs to God and England." C. St. J.B. Poirot slipped it into his pocket. Barrington's insurance, hidden where only the killer would look. Outside, the village stirred. Lights flickered on, curtains twitched. Septsault appeared in his nightshirt, lantern trembling. Blaise Rowan ran from the vicarage, coatless, face stricken. "It's over," Poirot announced to the gathering crowd. "The murderer is taken. The treasure, such as remains, will be catalogued for the nation." Harrow was bundled into the police Austin, still muttering about legacy. Lydia stood apart, arms wrapped around herself. Rowan approached her hesitantly. She turned away. Poirot watched the car disappear down the lane, taillights winking like dying embers. The church loomed behind him, stained glass dark now. Secrets bled out into the frost. Bragg touched his bandaged head. "Will you stay for the inquest, sir?" Poirot shook his head. Hercule Poirot has done his part. The little grey cells require chocolate and repose. He glanced at the east window one last time. "Though I confess, the Virgin's smile seems almost relieved." As dawn paled the sky, the bell-ringers arrived for practice. The first note tolled across the village, clear and pure, washing the night's violence from the air. Poirot walked towards the vicarage, footsteps crunching on frost, the weight of the gold fragment light in his pocket. Behind him, the church stood silent, its windows catching the first rays of sun, fractured light reassembling into rainbows, saints and serpents dancing together in harmless glory. But in the crypt, the charnel pit grate lay askew, and from the darkness below, a single bone had rolled free. A finger, perhaps, pointing eternally toward the truth that had finally clawed its way into the light. Chapter 7. Sins of the Sainted Glass. The village hall smelled of beeswax, damp wool, and the ghost of 1,000 whist drives. Folding chairs scraped across the parquet as St. Aldhelm's inhabitants filed in, faces pinched with cold and curiosity. A trestle table at the front held the east window's secrets laid bare. The Jesse pane with its hidden gold, the fractured David shard wrapped in cotton wool, the medieval manuscript from the crypt, and, most damning, the oilskin packet bearing Charles Barrington's final note. Poirot stood beside the table like a museum curator. Gloved hands clasped, moustaches waxed to lethal points. Reverend Vale had opened the meeting with a prayer that trembled more than it comforted. Now he sat in the front row, prayer book closed on his knee, eyes fixed on the floorboards. Lydia Trevthicker occupied the chair beside him. Black coat buttoned to the throat, gloved fingers knotted in her lap. Blaise Rowan leaned against the wall at the back, arms folded, face unreadable. Septsalt shuffled in late, cap clutched to his chest like a shield. Poirot waited until the last cough subsided. When he spoke, his voice, light, precise, carrying the faintest Belgian lilt, filled the hall without effort. Mesdames et messieurs, you are here to learn how death came to hide behind the stained glass of your church. But first, you must understand the window itself. It is not merely beautiful. It is a confession. He lifted the Jesse pane. Light from the hall's single bulb struck the glass, throwing a distorted vine across the ceiling. Observe the tree of Jesse, genealogy of Christ, each ancestor a panel, each panel a sin, pride in Solomon's crown, lust in David's harp, greed in the golden fruit, and here he turned the pane so the reverse faced the room. The gold leaf gleamed like a wound. Avarice made visible. Gold hidden beneath paint, stolen in 1890 by Mr. Enoch Salt, architect and great-uncle to Felix Harrow. A collective intake of breath. Heads swiveled towards the side door, where Constable Bragg stood guard over the handcuffed architect. Harrow's face was grey, stubble dark against pallid skin, but his eyes burned with defiance. Poirot continued. Mr. Salt sold the gold for an organ, £47, 3 shillings, 6pence, a bargain, but some gold remained, overlooked, or perhaps too difficult to extract without shattering the glass. It slept for 60 years, until Charles St. John Barrington arrived in 1951. He placed the pane down and lifted Barrington's note. Barrington was charming, reckless, and greedy. He measured, sketched, suspected. On the night of August 3rd, he received this. Poirot produced the carbon copy from the crypt. A letter signed F, inviting him to the crypt at midnight to share the treasure. Harrow lunged against Bragg's grip. Lies! I told you! I left him alive! Poirot's smile was wintry. Oui, you left him alive, in the crypt, but not for long. You struck him with a shard of glass taken from a cracked panel in the Lady Chapel, St. Catherine's Wheel, perhaps. One blow here. He touched his own temple. Then you dragged the body upstairs, concealed it behind the Virgin, and resealed the compartment with plaster of Paris mixed to mimic ancient mortar. Lydia made a small sound, half sob, half protest. Rowan's arms dropped to his sides. Poirot turned to the manuscript. But the sins are older than 1951. This document, hidden since 1539, lists the Abbey's relics. 3 jewelled crosses were bricked into the east wall. Salt found 2. The third, he lifted the oilskin packet. Barrington scraped from the Virgin's panel and hid in the Jesse pane, with this note as insurance. He intended to expose the theft, perhaps blackmail the village. You, Monsieur Harrow, could not allow it. Harrow's voice cracked. He laughed at me. Said the church was a museum of hypocrisy, hiding gold while children starved. I struck in anger, yes, but it was justice. Justice, Poirot echoed, does not stuff a man behind the Virgin Mary like a forgotten umbrella. He moved to the David shard. 2 years later, the restoration began. You feared discovery, so you broke this panel deliberately. planted modern gold leaf to confuse the trail, and prepared a duplicate weapon, should the original shard ever surface. Sept Salt spoke for the first time, voice quavering. "I saw him, Mr. Poirot. Night before the body was found. Light in the church, moving like a ghost. Thought it were the Black Monk." Poirot inclined his head. "You saw Monsieur Harrow returning to check his handiwork. The plaster was setting unevenly. He feared it would crumble. But Blaise Rowan arrived early the next morning and pressed the loose brick. The compartment opened. Your secret, Monsieur Harrow, was out." Rowan stepped forward, voice raw. "I lent Charles my scarf. He wore it that night. Said the crypt was cold. When I found the body, the scarf was still knotted at his throat. I left it. I was afraid." Lydia rose, trembling. "Felix told me Charles had gone to France. He said the gold was a myth, that I should fund the restoration to prove it. I believed him." Her voice broke. "I loved this church." Poirot's tone softened. "Mademoiselle, love blinds us to many things, but it also illuminates. You suspected Harrow when you found the 1890 ledger. That is why you followed Blaise to the manor the night of the broken panel, to warn him, non?" She nodded, tears spilling. "I thought Felix might hurt him too." Harrow laughed bitterly. "I never touched the boy. He was useful. His sketches distracted the village while I worked." Poirot lifted the final piece, the vermilion thread from the north door latch, silk from Monsieur Rowan's scarf. "It caught when you dragged the body through, Monsieur Harrow. A tiny thread, but enough to unravel your tapestry of lies." He faced the room. "The sins of the stained glass are these: pride in believing the church's reputation worth a man's life, greed in stealing what belonged to history, lust not for flesh but for possession, wrath, the blow that ended Charles Barrington, envy of a charming outsider who saw what you could not, gluttony for secrets that could not be digested, sloth in leaving the body to rot rather than face justice." He turned to Harrow. "You confessed in the crypt, oui, but confession without remorse is merely noise." Harrow sagged. "What happens now?" "The gold, such as remains, will be removed under supervision and given to the Crown. The window will be restored with clear glass in the affected panels. The secret will be told in a plaque, so no child grows up believing saints hoard treasure. And you, Monsieur Harrow, will face the assizes. Murder, concealment of a corpse, theft of ecclesiastical property. The judge will not be merciful." Bragg led Harrow away. The hall was silent save for Lydia's quiet weeping. Vale stood, voice steady for the first time. "The church will hold a service of penitence tomorrow. All are welcome." Poirot gathered the exhibits into a wooden crate. "Mon père, one final task. The St. Catherine panel. There is a crack in the wheel. I believe the original murder weapon is hidden there, wrapped in lead to prevent further shattering." Vale blanched but nodded. "It will be done." Outside, the November sun struggled through clouds, striking weak rainbows from the hall's frosted windows. Poirot paused on the steps, breathing air sharp with wood smoke. Rowan approached hesitantly. "Will Lydia be all right?" Poirot studied the young man. "She loved the church more than any man. That love will sustain her. But you, Monsieur Rowan, paint what you have seen. Truth is the only pigment that never fades." Rowan nodded, eyes bright. "I'll start with the serpent, eating its tail, beginning and end." Poirot smiled faintly. "L'éternité, appropriate." As he walked towards the vicarage, the Schustadt church bell began to toll, not the mournful note of death, but a measured peal of cleansing. Villagers emerged from cottages, faces turned towards the sound. The stained glass windows caught the light, colours spilling across the churchyard like spilled jewels. Ruby for wrath, sapphire for sorrow, emerald for hope. Poirot paused beneath the east window. The Virgin gazed down, her lapis robe untouched by the revelations below. Behind her, the hidden compartment gaped empty, bricks stark against the ancient wall. "Madam," he murmured, "your secret is out, but your mercy, it endures." A sudden gust rattled the lead cames. For an instant, the serpent roundel seemed to writhe, chalice bleeding crimson. Then the wind died, and the glass was still. Poirot turned away. The little grey cells were quiet now, satisfied. But in the silence he heard it, a faint crystalline chime from within the church, as though a final shard had fallen into place. The sins of the sainted glass were named. The mosaic of motives was complete. Chapter 8. The Mosaic of Motives. The vicarage drawing-room had been transformed into a court of inquiry. A coal fire crackled in the grate, throwing restless shadows across the oak panelling. Poirot had arranged the suspects in a semicircle, like pieces on a chessboard. Reverend Vale in his winged armchair, prayer book closed, Lydia Trev thicker on the sofa, hands folded with enforced calm, Blaise Rowan perched on a footstool, charcoal-stained fingers twitching, Sept Salt in the corner, cap turning endlessly in his lap. Felix Harrow sat apart, wrists in cuffs, Constable Bragg a silent sentinel at his shoulder. On the mantelpiece, the east window fragments lay under a velvet cloth, evidence now, not relics. Poirot stood before the fire, a small figure dominating the room by sheer presence. Outside, a November gale lashed the windows, rain hissed against the panes like impatient whispers. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, "we have named the killer. But murder is never a single act. It is a mosaic, each tiny shard a motive, each grout line a lie. Tonight, we fit the final pieces." He lifted the velvet cloth. The Jessie pane caught the firelight, gold leaf flickering like a trapped flame. Piece 1, Discovery. Charles Barrington arrives in 1951, sketching, measuring. He finds the 1890 ledger in the muniment room, proof that Enoch Salt stole the monk's gold. He confronts Felix Harrow, who has inherited both the architect's practice and the family shame. Harrow's jaw tightened. He came to my office in Bath, waved the ledger like a winning hand, said he'd expose us unless I paid. Poirot nodded. Piece 2, Temptation. You, Monsieur Harrow, saw opportunity. The remaining gold, 3 panels untouched, could restore your fortune. You wrote the letter. Meet me in the crypt. The gold will make us rich. Lydia leaned forward. But Charles wasn't greedy. He wanted fame. His book on medieval glass would make him the expert. Précisément, Poirot said. He wished to reveal the theft, not profit from it. That is why you killed him. He turned to the David shard. Piece 3, The Weapon. You prepared it days earlier. A cracked panel from the St. Catherine window, glass wrapped in lead, weighted, razor sharp. You tested it on the sarcophagus in the crypt. 3 triangular scars. Sept Salt nodded vigorously. I seen the marks. Thought boys had been at it with knives. Poirot lifted the cigarette packet from the crypt. Piece 4, Carelessness. Player's navy cut. Your brand, Monsieur Harrow. You smoked while waiting in the crypt, nerves frayed. The torn corner became your note to Barrington. Harrow shrugged. A mistake. I was agitated. Piece 5, The Murder. Midnight, August 3rd. Barrington descends to the crypt, vermilion scarf bright against the dark. You argue. He laughs, says the gold belongs in a museum. You strike. 1 blow. He falls against the charnel pit. The scarf catches on a bone, tears. You drag him upstairs, leaving the vermilion thread on the north door latch. Rowan's voice was hoarse. I lent him that scarf. He said the crypt was cold as a tomb. Poirot's eyes softened. Piece 6, concealment. You stuff the body behind the Virgin's panel, already loosened for your midnight meeting. You scrape the gold Barrington had pried loose, hide it in the Jessie pane with his note. Then plaster of Paris mixed in the vestry sink, traces still in the plug hole. Vale stirred. The sink was cleaned the next morning by Mrs. Puttock. Oui, Poirot said, but plaster leaves residue. Constable Bragg found it this afternoon. He produced a small envelope, shook out pale crumbs. Piece 7, the cover-up. 2 years pass. The restoration begins, funded by Mademoiselle Trèves-Thiquet. You, Monsieur Harrow, are appointed architect. Panic. You break the David panel, plant modern gold leaf, hoping to convince us the treasure was a recent forgery. Lydia's voice shook. You asked me to increase the budget, said the east window needed special attention. Harrow's laugh was bitter. I needed time to remove the real gold, but Poirot arrived. Poirot lifted the serpent roundel. Piece 8, the symbol. The Ouroboros you carved into the lead after breaking the David panel. Eternity, the cycle of greed, your family's sin repeating. He turned to Rowan. Piece 9, the red herring. Your affair with Mademoiselle Trèves-Thiquet. Brief, innocent. Barrington teased you both. The village gossiped. You feared suspicion when the body was found wearing your scarf. Rowan flushed. I thought if I said nothing, it would die down. Piece 10, the witness. Monsieur Septsault hears the scream. Barrington's last sound. He sees a light in the church the night before discovery. You, Monsieur Harrow, checking the plaster. Septsault nodded. Tall, shadow, moving quick. Thought it were the monk. Poirot stepped to the window. Rain streaked the glass. Beyond, the church tower loomed black against the storm. Piece 11, the trap. Last night you returned for the Jessie gold. The note, the loosened pane, irresistible. You attacked Constable Bragg, confessed in the struggle. I struck in anger. It was justice. Harrow's head dropped. He mocked me. Said my great-uncle was a thief, and I was worse. A murderer for pennies. I saw red. Poirot's voice softened. Piece 12, the motive mosaic. Not one sin, but many. Family shame, to bury the salt theft. Greed for the remaining gold. Fear of exposure. Wrath at Barrington's laughter. Pride in believing you could outwit history. He faced the room. Each of you contributed a shard. Mademoiselle Trèves-Thiquet, your love for the church blinded you to Harrow's desperation. Monsieur Rowan, your silence fed suspicion. Monsieur Vale, your faulty north door latch allowed the crime. Monsieur Septsault, your fear of ghosts kept you silent. Vale's voice was barely audible. I failed my flock. No, Poirot said. You failed a building. The flock survives. He turned to Harrow. Your final lie, the modern gold leaf. You bought it in Bath 1951. Receipt in your office desk. Constable Bragg retrieved it this morning. Harrow closed his eyes. I wanted to confuse the trail. Make it seem Barrington planted the gold himself. Poirot replaced the velvet cloth. The mosaic is complete. Tomorrow, the coroner will hear the evidence. The gold, 3 sheets, medieval, worth perhaps $500, will fund a new roof for the church. The east window will be repaired with clear glass. A brass plaque will tell the truth. Here once hid treasure and tragedy. Let light prevail. Lydia stood, steady now. I'll pay for the plaque. And the roof. Poirot bowed. Mademoiselle, your penance is accepted. Outside the storm peaked. Thunder rolled like judgment. Lightning illuminated the church, the east window flashing white. saints and serpents frozen in a single blinding instant. Poirot opened the door. Rain swept in, cold and clean. The mosaic is set, but one pane remains, the revelation under stormlight, where all colours merge into truth. He stepped into the gale, coat whipping, hat clutched tight. Behind him, the suspects sat in silence, each holding a shard of their own making. The church bell tolled midnight, its note carried on the wind across the downs. Somewhere in the darkness, a loose scaffold pole clanged against stone. Once, twice, then still, the killer was named. The motives laid bare. Chapter 9. Revelation in Rainbow Hues. The storm broke at 4 in the afternoon, just as the church clock began its cracked chime. Black clouds rolled over the downs like an avenging host. Thunder growled above the tower. Inside St. Mary and All Saints, every pane of the east window blazed with unnatural fire, colours writhing as lightning strobed through the nave. Rain hammered the lead roof like 1,000 thrown pebbles. Poirot stood alone in the chancel, overcoat unbuttoned, hat in hand. The scaffold had been dismantled. Only the Virgin's panel remained in place, its hidden compartment now a dark rectangle of absence. On the high altar lay the final evidence. The original murder weapon, wrapped in lead, still flecked with Barrington's dried blood, retrieved that morning from the St. Catherine wheel by a trembling Sept Salt. Footsteps echoed behind him. Felix Harrow entered through the north door, coat sodden, hair plastered to his skull. Bragg followed, revolver drawn, but Poirot raised a hand. "Laissez, constable. This is between the killer and the glass." Harrow stopped beneath the window, rain dripping from his cuffs. Lightning flashed. For an instant his face was a death mask in sapphire and crimson. "You wanted a final audience," he said, voice raw. "Here I am." Poirot inclined his head. "Oui, but not for confession. You have confessed enough. For understanding, the storm will be our witness." Another crash of thunder. The church lights flickered, died, then steadied. In the half-dark, the stained glass seemed alive. Saints marching, serpents coiling, the Virgin's lapis robe rippling like water. Harrow laughed, a cracked sound. "Understanding? I killed a man for laughing at my family's shame. There's nothing to understand." "Au contraire," Poirot said softly. "There is everything. Observe." He moved to the Jessie pane, now reinstalled but with its gold removed. "This panel, your great-uncle left untouched. Why?" Harrow shrugged. "Too difficult. The vine tracery is complex. The glass would shatter." "No. He left it because it was the heart of the tree, the direct line from Jessie to Christ. To steal from it would be sacrilege. Even a thief could not stomach. But you had no such restraint." Lightning again. The Virgin's face glowed, serene, terrible. Poirot lifted the bloodied shard. "This weapon! You kept it 2 years, hidden in the wheel of St. Catherine. Why?" Harrow's eyes flicked to it, then away. "Proof. If the body was found, I could claim Barrington attacked me. Self-defense." "Mensonge," Poirot said. "You kept it as a trophy. The architect who built his future on a single perfect blow." Harrow's hands clenched. "He mocked me. Said Salt was a grave robber, and I was his echo. I saw the shard in my toolkit. Glass I'd cut for repair. It was inevitable." The church door creaked open again. Lydia Trevthicke entered, cloak streaming water, followed by Blaise Rowan and Reverend Vale. They took places in the shadows, witnesses now, not suspects. Poirot addressed them all. The final lie. Harrow claimed he'd left Barrington alive in the crypt, but the scream Sept Salt heard was here, in the sanctuary. He pointed to the altar, Barrington was struck here, beside the high altar. The drop of blood, the flake of gold leaf, both found beneath the cloth. You dragged him to the scaffold, Monsieur Harrow, leaving the vermilion thread on the latch. The crypt letter was a blind. Barrington never went below. Harrow's face twisted. Clever, but you'll never prove... Lightning illuminated the east window in a blinding sheet. For one heartbeat, every panel fused into pure white light. Then colour exploded back, ruby, emerald, gold. In that instant Poirot saw it. A hairline crack in the Virgin's halo, invisible until the storm's angle struck true. Behind the crack, something glinted. He climbed the temporary ladder left by the glaziers, fingers tracing the lead. The crack widened under pressure. A thin sheet of vellum slipped out, fluttering to the flagstones like a dying moth. Poirot descended, unfolded it with reverence. Barrington's handwriting, frantic. If I die, know this, Felix Harrow killed me for the gold. He has the shard. The Virgin hides my proof. See St. J.B., Lydia gasped. Rowan swore softly. Vale crossed himself. Harrow lunged, not for Poirot, but for the note. Bragg intercepted, wrestling him to the ground. The architect fought like a madman, rain and tears streaking his face. "It was mine!" he screamed. "The gold, my birthright. Salt stole it. I reclaimed it." Poirot stood over him, voice calm amid the storm. "No, monsieur. You reclaimed nothing but ruin. The gold was never yours, nor Salt's, nor the monk's. It belonged to the light." Thunder rolled, deafening. The church lights failed entirely. Only the stained glass lived, fed by lightning. In its kaleidoscope glow, Harrow's struggles slowed. Bragg cuffed him to a pew. Poirot lifted the vellum to the window. Rainbows danced across Barrington's words. Accusation and absolution in one. "The revelation," he said, "is complete. The storm has spoken." As if in answer, the clouds parted. A single shaft of sunlight pierced the tempest, striking the east window. The Virgin's face shone pure. The serpent roundel now merely glass and lead. The hidden compartment gaped empty, a mouth finally silenced. Lydia approached, eyes on the note. "He knew he might die. He left this for us." "Oui," Poirot said. "Charles Barrington was many things, charming, reckless, greedy, but in the end he chose truth." Rowan spoke for the first time. "I'll paint it. The storm, the light, the crack in the halo, so no one forgets." Vale's voice was steady. "The service of penitence, tomorrow at dawn. The church will be open to all." Harrow was hauled to his feet, defeated. As Bragg led him out, the architect looked back once. At the window, at the empty space behind the Virgin. His reflection fractured across a dozen panels, then vanished into the rain. The door closed. Silence fell, broken only by dripping water and the soft creak of ancient timbers. Poirot gathered the evidence, the shard, the vellum, the gold fragments now sealed in envelopes. He placed Barrington's note atop the altar, waited with a single candle stub. "Requiescat in pace," he murmured. Sunlight strengthened, gilding the nave. Dust motes floated like incense. The east window settled into ordinary beauty, colours no longer hiding secrets, only telling stories. Lydia touched the altar cloth. "Will you stay for the service, monsieur?" Poirot shook his head. "Hercule Poirot's work is done. The little grey cells require only one more thing, chocolate chaude and a train to London." He donned his hat, bowed to the window. "Adieu, madame. Your vigil is over." Outside, the storm had passed. The churchyard steamed in sudden warmth. Raindrops glittered on every leaf like scattered diamonds. Villagers emerged, faces turned to the unexpected sun. The bell ringers began a joyful peal, 6 bells in perfect concord, washing the air clean. Poirot walked the gravel path, suitcase in hand. At the lich gate, he paused. Behind him, the east window caught the light one final time. A rainbow arc spanning the sky, touching the tower, then fading into ordinary day. The revelation was complete. The hues of truth had spoken. Chapter 10. The Final Pane of Truth. The village hall was packed to the rafters, every bench filled, villagers standing 3 deep along the walls. Sunlight streamed through the high windows, dust motes swirling like slow-motion snow. At the front, a single trestle table held the east window's remnants under a crisp white cloth. The Jesse pane, the David shard, the bloodied weapon, Barrington's vellum note. A brass plaque, newly cast, still smelling of the foundry, leaned against the table leg, its inscription gleaming. In memory of Charles St. John Barrington, 1916-1951, murdered for seeking truth behind the stained glass. Let light prevail. Erected by the people of St. Aldhelm, 1953. Hercule Poirot stood before them in immaculate grey, Homburg hat in hand, moustaches gleaming like polished ebony. Reverend Vale sat to his left, prayer book open but unread. Lydia Trevthicker, in sombre navy, occupied the right. Blaise Rowan stood behind her, a fresh canvas under his arm. Constable Bragg guarded the door. Felix Harrow already departed for Chippenham Jail in the custody of 2 sergeants. Poirot raised a hand. Silence fell as completely as the hush before communion. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, voice carrying to the back row without effort. "You have lived with shadows for 2 years. Today, we banish them with the final pane of truth." He lifted the white cloth. Gasps rippled through the hall as the evidence caught the light. Gold leaf flickering, glass edges sharp as memory. "Let us assemble the complete picture, une fois pour toutes." He began with the Jesse pane, holding it aloft so the vine tracery caught the sun. Panel 1. The tree. Medieval monks hid 3 sheets of gold, here in 1539, beaten thin, painted over. Enoch Salt stole 2 in 1890, sold them for an organ. The third slept until 1951. He set it down, lifted the David shard. Panel 2. The harp. Fractured deliberately by Felix Harrow 2 nights ago. Modern gold leaf planted to confuse. But the crack revealed the forger's hand. Next, the bloodied weapon, glass wrapped in lead, triangular point dark with old gore. Panel 3. The wheel. From St. Catherine's window, prepared by Harrow as murder weapon. One blow to the temple, here, he touched his own head. Beside the high altar. Blood drop, gold flake, vermilion thread on the latch. The trail of Cain. He placed Barrington's vellum note beside it. Panel 4. The Virgin's halo. Charles Barrington's final message slipped into a hairline crack as Harrow dragged him past. "Felix Harrow killed me for the gold." Written in his own blood, perhaps, before consciousness fled. Lydia's hand flew to her mouth. Rowan's knuckles whitened on the canvas. Poirot continued, voice steady. Panel 5. The crypt. Red herring. The forged letter lured Barrington to the church, but the murder occurred above, in the sanctuary. The scream Sept Salt heard was Barrington's last breath, cut short by the shard. He lifted the cigarette packet. Panel 6. The smoke. Player's navy cut. Harrow's brand. Torn corner became the lure note, found in the sarcophagus dust. The vermilion thread sealed in a glassine envelope. Panel 7. The scarf. Blaise Rowan's, lent to Barrington, caught on the north door latch as the body was dragged through. A single silk strand, yet it unravelled the tapestry. Finally, the brass plaque. Panel 8. The light. The east window will be restored with clear glass where gold once hid. This plaque will tell the story. No more secrets, no more shame. He stepped back. The mosaic is complete. Motive, family shame, greed, fear. Opportunity, the faulty north door latch, the restoration scaffold. Method, a shard of medieval glass, weighted with lead. The killer, Felix Harrow, who believed he reclaimed a birthright but only inherited a curse. A murmur swept the hall. An elderly woman in the front row began to weep quietly. Septsault removed his cap, pressed it to his heart. Poirot's voice softened. But truth is not punishment alone. It is restoration. He turned to Lydia. Mademoiselle, the Manor's roof fund. She stood steady now. £10,000, monsieur. The church will have a new roof. The Archaeological Society a proper museum and, she gestured to Rowan's canvas, a painting for the north wall. Blaise's work, the storm, the rainbow, the crack in the halo. Rowan uncovered the canvas. Gasps turned to awed silence. The east window blazed in oils. Lightning splitting the sky, colours bleeding into white, the Virgin's face serene above the chaos. In the foreground, a single shard of glass lay on the altar, reflecting the rainbow. Title, in careful script, Revelation. Poirot bowed to the artist. Magnifique! Truth in pigment. Vale rose, voice strong for the first time. The penitent service begins in 1 hour. The church is open. All are welcome. No judgment, only healing. The crowd began to file out, footsteps echoing. Poirot lingered, gathering the evidence into a leather case. Lydia approached, eyes bright. You leave today? The 11:07 from Chippenham, Poirot confirmed. George has packed the crème de menthe pastille. She hesitated. Will you return? He smiled, the famous smile that had closed 1,000 cases. Jamais, mademoiselle. St. Aldhelm's mystery is solved, but, he glanced at the plaque, should another secret stir behind the glass, Hercule Poirot is never far. Rowan joined them, canvas under arm. The painting is yours to unveil, Miss Lydia, at the service. She nodded, tears threatening but unshed. Thank you, Monsieur Poirot, for the truth. La vérité, he corrected gently, is the only pain that never fractures. Outside, the sun had fully broken through. The churchyard steamed gently. Raindrops glittered on every leaf. Villagers streamed towards the lich gate, faces uplifted. The bell ringers began a triumphant peal. 8 bells now, the cracked tenor repaired with Lydia's funds. Poirot walked the gravel path one last time. At the east end, glaziers were already at work. The Virgin's panel removed, clear glass being cut to size. The hidden compartment gaped empty, bricks cleaned, ready for the plaque. He paused beneath the window. Sunlight poured through the remaining coloured panels, painting the ground in jewelled fragments. Ruby, sapphire, emerald, gold. The serpent roundel caught the light, chalice no longer bleeding, but glowing with harmless fire. Adieu, Poirot murmured to the glass. Your secrets are light now. A sudden gust rattled the lead came. For an instant the colours shifted, forming, in the flagstone's reflection, the faint outline of a man. Tall, fair, vermilion scarf bright at his throat. Charles Barrington smiling. Then the wind died, and the image dissolved into ordinary rainbows. Poirot adjusted his hat, turned away. The Austin taxi waited at the gate, engine purring. George stood beside it, suitcase already stowed. As they drove through the village, Poirot watched St. Aldhelm recede in the rear window. Thatched roofs, the war memorial, the church tower piercing a sky washed clean. Villagers waved, children ran alongside for a few yards laughing. At the station, the train steamed in precisely on time. Poirot boarded, settled into his first-class compartment, accepted a cup of chocolate from the attendant. The whistle blew, wheels turned. Through the window, the downs rolled away, green gold, eternal. In the distance, the church's new clear pane caught the sun, flashing once like a signal. Poirot raised his cup in silent salute. The final pane of truth was set. The stained glass, cleansed of blood and greed, would shine for centuries. Rainbows for the living, light for the dead. And somewhere in the rhythm of the rails, Hercule Poirot heard the faint crystalline chime of glass settling into lead, click, 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 the sound of order restored. He closed his eyes, moustaches twitching with satisfaction. Case closed.